Thank you. Good afternoon. And in fact, Elam has already made a very good summary of the Commission policy in terms of infrastructure. First of all, many thanks for your invitation, and I should even say twice thanks for the invitation, because it is my first time in Stockholm, thanks to you. So yes, I have to confess that I've not yet been in Stockholm. But in fact, I've already received another invitation to come in Sweden, but next time even much more in the north of Sweden, in Luleå, if you, I would say, can understand my pronunciation. We have received an invitation to visit and make a trip on an icebreaker. So as you can see, it will be my Swedish time. It is my pleasure to be with you today to explain in a few words what we are doing in Brussels in terms of development of transport infrastructure, and what we try hopefully to do for you. So as Elam indicated, I'm the head of the TEN-T unit, so TEN-T Trans-European Transport Network unit, since the beginning of 2021. So I've started my job in this unit by making the proposal revising the TEN-T policy, which we have made in close, I would say, with close involvement of the member states. And now in the coming months, with Sweden as Swedish presidency which will be closely involved and part of the negotiations of this TEN-T review process. So perhaps before going further, let me explain you with one word, starting with one word, what is TEN-T policy. So TEN-T policy in one word is infrastructure, development of infrastructure. So the TEN-T policy, let's say, is the infrastructure component of our EU transport policy. Just a few examples. If we want to have more people on the train to commute or for long distance trains, so for sure we can have market regulation, more competition, to have new market players. But in the end, what matters is infrastructure. We cannot offer good services to citizens if there is not good infrastructure. If we want to move, I would say, freight on the train, on the ships, again, infrastructure matters. For example, to have more terminals, to have transshipment facilities from one mode of transport to another mode of transport. And the last example, we hear a lot today about standards for cars to decarbonize road transport. All these standards are very good, but in the end, again, what matters is the infrastructure with the development of alternative fuel infrastructure. If I would summarize what we are doing in terms of TEN-T policy, I would say that what we want to do is to build a modern infrastructure while at the same time contributing to greening transport. And very important, because it is, I would say, at the heart of our policy, connecting EU member states. That's really the EU added value. And finally, what we want at any price is to build a multimodal transport system. So avoiding having, I would say, different modes of transport in silos. What we need to do is to connect road with rail, inland waterways, port, airports, and very important, also the cities. So if we want to go a little bit more in detail of this EU TEN-T policy, I would say that we try to reach 5 main objectives with the TEN-T policy. First of all, with infrastructure development, we want to contribute to the economic growth. So to basically contribute to the well-functioning of the internal market. And again, for that, we need good infrastructure to transport goods, people from point A to point B quickly and safely. Second objective in our jargon is what we call cohesion. What does it mean, cohesion? It means that we do not simply want to connect big capitals between themselves, not just to connect Stockholm to Denmark and to the economic centers in Germany, but we want also to connect the whole territory of Sweden. We want to connect what we call peripheral zone, less densely populated area. Third objective, very important in particular for this commission, greening of transport. We want to reduce the impact of transport on environment, so less pollution, and reduce the impact on climate change. And again, for that, we have a leverage by building the infrastructure which will contribute to decarbonize transport. You have probably heard about the Green Deal, perhaps also about the Fit 55 initiative of this commission, which is, let's say, a compilation of initiatives which all should contribute to decarbonization of economy and in particular decarbonization of transport. How to do that? For example, by increasing the modal share of railway, both for the transport of passengers and for the transport of freight. For example, by creating high speed and efficient line between capitals for the transport of passengers, but also by building an efficient infrastructure for the transport of freight. We want also to promote maritime transport. Here, when I mean maritime transport, it's not transport which comes from Asia, which anyway comes by ships, but I mean here short sea shipping, trying to move freight which normally goes on the road to transport it between ports, so through maritime links. And more generally, I would say beyond increasing the share, the modal share of rail and maritime transport, we want to decarbonize each and every mode of transport, including road transport by the development of alternative fuel infrastructure. Fourth objective, digitalization. We are no longer in the 60s or in the 70s where we're building new infrastructure. New infrastructure has an impact on the environment, on the soil. So we have to do, let's say, the best out of the existing infrastructure by optimizing the use of infrastructure. For example, I don't know if you have heard about that, ERTMS, which is the European Management System for Railway, which allows to, let's say, have more trains on the same track by reducing the distance between each train. So optimization of the transport infrastructure through digitalization. And fifth and very important last objective I would like to highlight, security of Europe. More than ever, very important following the war in Ukraine. We need to, I would say, to improve military mobility, to build infrastructure which will allow to ensure what we call short notice and large scale movement of military forces for material, troops and food. So what we are doing in Brussels, in particular with the help of my colleague who is here in the room, Siamak Jalali, is to create synergies between, let's say, the TEN-T civilian infrastructure and the military infrastructure. So these are the main objectives of our policy that we try to promote with two basic instruments, here two acronyms. I already mentioned one, TEN-T, Trans-European Transport Policy, which I would say is our Bible. And the second acronym, you will even like it more, CEF, CEF, Connecting Europe Facility. You will like it because it's the funding instrument of the Commission, so the possibilities for the Commission to co-fund a project. So under the TEN-T policy, we define, that's very important, not just the line that we want to develop on the network, but we define very clear standard for the infrastructure. What we want to build is high quality infrastructure. So for example, for rail, we define, for example, the speed of the line, the length of the train that should be able to circulate on the infrastructure. We also define the network through maps, and we have third component, governance, in particular coordinators who try to facilitate the development of infrastructure. You are probably aware that we are revising this, let's say, this Bible, which is the basis of the development of the infrastructure policy. The Council, so the member states, reached an agreement in December, and it will be now the turn of the European Parliament to decide and to vote on this major revision of the TEN-T policy in Brussels. So these are the few elements that I wanted to highlight. I will stop here because I see that Elam is already putting pressure on me. So just to conclude, as I hope that I gave you a taste of what we are doing in Brussels, and hopefully for you, we are, I would say, very committed to build, I would say, modern and green infrastructure, but very important, we cannot do that alone. We need the support of infrastructure. In fact, we can incentivize the member states to build good infrastructure, but in the end, we cannot impose the building of infrastructure on the territory of a member state. That's the member states which in the end decide on that. So that's really a matter on which we have to work in close cooperation. Thank you.